Welcome. We're glad you found this recorded presentation by the Knox County Master Gardeners. We are a volunteer community service group affiliated with the University of Tennessee, as well as Tennessee State University and their cooperative extension programs. The mission of the Knox County Master Gardener program is to educate and serve the community using research-based information on best practices in horticulture, environmental stewardship, and integrated pest management. One of the ways we educate is through our Speakers Bureau.
Hi, everyone. It's Chris Lee and Marian Phillips here. We're going to speak to you today about making your garden attractive in all 4 seasons. Our journey on 4-season gardening began this spring in March when we were on a trip and we got the opportunity to stop at Gibbs Garden in Northwest Georgia. Gibbs Garden is, I'm sure many of you know, is a 300-acre residential estate garden about an hour north of Atlanta. At that time, the time we visited, the dogwoods were in bloom. 20 million of them, if you can believe that, 150 different varieties of daffodils, in case I missed saying that. And we were very excited to see the beauty of the garden at that time. And as we looked at each other, we said, oh my gosh, we have to come back in another season. We have to come back in the fall when the 3,000 Japanese maples are ablaze with fall colors. So this journey to Gibbs Garden, which is shown here, the Giverny replica bridge, the teal bridge, originally designed for Monet, showing in fall and spring, made us start thinking and led us to notice and learn more about 4-season gardening, which led us to this presentation today. Starting at the beginning, what are 4-season gardens? This is one person's succinct definition, and we think it's a pretty good one. The 4 seasons gardens provide year-round interest and color to the landscape, employing a well-chosen mix of native plants, annuals, flowering shrubs, and trees. This is the garden that you're going to see in the next 4 photographs of one of our fellow master gardeners, Lynn Carlson. It's a beautiful layered woodland garden, and it shows the changes through the seasons very well. In this first spring picture, we see the beautiful anise tree on the right-hand background, a very beautiful plant that you'll see in the following seasons. You can also see the shooting star to the right and the foam flower in the front, and of course the beautiful hosta. So let's look at this same place in the next season. See how it's changed in the summer. In the summer, Lynn's garden relies more on interesting foliage. There's fine textured plants to kind of add an airy, weightless quality. And also the bold foliage jumps forward. You see the rhododendron becomes really into its own. It takes center stage as it blooms. The backstory shows another interesting plant, the fetter bush, which really creates kind of a screen and creates its own backstory to the garden. Moving along to fall, you'll see fall we're not yet ready for the leaves to come into their color, but you do see that the evergreen foliage still plays a very preeminent role, and it kind of highlights the texture and shapes of the shrubs that you see. The anise tree is still very brilliant in contrast to the darker leaves of the rhododendron. And then we move into winter. The garden moves into winter and a very different picture emerges. The hobblebush, fetter bush is still a very preeminent feature, but you also look to the backstory and see the structure of the trees. And that gives a whole different feel to the very same area that we've looked at in the previous pictures. And so that is just 4 seasons, 1 garden for you to consider how the changes play out in each season. Now we move to some garden design principles that will help you as you are gardening to create a very cohesive look. These are offered by author and garden horticulturist Marie Iannotti. And she suggests that we consider order, harmony, and flow. Now, order, balance, proportion, all kind of playing off each other are obtained by using symmetry, repetition of plants or color, and a balance of bold features and fine or muted features. Then moving on to harmony, it's created more by editing the landscape so all parts of the garden work together using limited color, palette, and repetition of key plants. And finally, flow, transition, and rhythm keep visitors moving through the discovery of your garden using layering and sequencing of plants. We have some photo examples of these principles. We return again to Lynn Carlson's garden, and you can see the tiering, the layers from top to bottom that give us an effect of moving through the garden just by looking from the top to the bottom of this display. The beautiful multicolored hosta, the flowers of the woodland tobacco, the contrast of the astilbe, which is to the right of this picture, and I don't think you get a very good view of it in this picture, but you can see to the left the not yet to bloom dragon arum. So the repetition and the layers and the fine and the bold textures are things you're looking for when you're designing for proportion. This is a very special place to me. It's where I work at the Knox County Master Demonstration Garden at the All Saints Church. This is one of the small peaceful grottos that are on the grounds of this church setting. And it's a very peaceful place in a much larger area. You can see that it uses a limited color palette, just the pink and the white. There's repetition of the white plants. But something to consider is how the backstory plays into this. The backstory is actually athletic fields, but it's still very much as a framework for this garden. And here's another example of repetition and rhythm. Your eyes flow down this fence row. The repeating plants and colors create a very harmonious view. It's at one time both simple and yet very beautiful. This is one of our favorite places. It's Marian's Fern Garden. It's a beautiful informal fern garden. You are drawn into the area. You can see how sequence and flow work here. The curved lines draw you into the garden. The various textures of the overstory trees come into play, as well as the differing green hues of the ferns.
All right, hi, it's Marian, and I'm going to talk about some strategies for creating a 4-season garden. There are 2 big things to think about. One is thoughtful planning, and the other is your smart plant selection. And what I want to do now is think about giving you a way to move forward in making some changes to your landscape so that it's there for you all year round. I want you to observe plants in all seasons, and the way you're going to do that is more of a formal assessment of what you currently have in your yard in the 4 seasons. And you may want to get out a pad and pencil and make some lists and think about what did you have in the springtime? What did you have during the summer? What do you have in the wintertime? Right now it's fall, so look around. Look at your habitat. Think about what all is going on in your yard right now. And make some lists, create some bloom charts where you know what the plants are that you have and when they bloom. And this goes back to what we were saying, the thoughtful planning and the smart plant selection. As you're assessing, you need to understand what kind of a yard you have in the way of your soil, the water that you have available in your yard and garden, sun and shade. Think about what your yard looks like, and your yard will be very different from your neighbor's yard as far as sun, shade, soil conditions, all of that. So think about what you have in your yard that will create a habitat and a beautiful landscape. And there are many, many sources out there, resources for you to begin to explore. In the wintertime is a great time to do that. So look at what gardens may be available to look at online. Look at them for what you have in your neighbor's yard. You might want to just drive around and look at what others have in their yard. Look at your neighbors, look around in your town. See what's there right now, or maybe what you remember from earlier in the season. All right, now there are many different categories to choose from for successional interest. You've got bulbs, perennials, biennials, annuals, and you on your flowering shrubs, trees, and vines. There's such a wide variety of plants that you can have in your yard to enhance the year-round appeal. And let's look at some of the things that are going on in the pictures here. You have your daffodils in the foreground up in the top picture, with the forsythia in the background and the tree structure there that they have not begun to bloom yet. So your forsythia and your daffodils really pop in the environment. And then for the wintertime, this is a red twig dogwood, which is gorgeous in the wintertime because of the vivid red of the stems. And in the spring, this plant has blossoms on it. That turn into berries, and then in the fall you have the colors changing of the leaves. So this is one of those plants that gives year-round interest and is such a valuable addition to that could possibly be one that you would want to add to your landscape. You'll also see the fall garden there, and what they've done is they've taken a picture of a house and in the fall, and just look at it. Look at all the interest there. You've got hydrangeas that are changing color from the deep green to the deep burgundy. You've got some grasses in the foreground. You've got your hosta, which are changing color also. You've got a tree there that the leaves are changing beautifully, but also notice that the bark on the tree there is a great point of interest for this particular yard that's highlighted against the house. In the last picture there is a summertime garden, and there are all kinds of blooming perennials there. Most of these are perennials, and right in the very center, and we're going to come back to this later, you'll see a sedum there that's looking like it's gathering steam to blossom later in the summer going on into fall, which is a great plant for fall planting. But you have your black-eyed Susie, you got coneflower. This is a wonderful garden showing tons of blooms that you can have during the summer. All right, so there are other important considerations as you're selecting plants. I want to encourage all to choose plants that enhance the environment, that provide host and pollinators for bees, insects, birds, butterflies, so that you can have an environment there that is not only beautiful and appealing to the eye, but is also providing and giving back to the natural habitat in your area. As you're looking around your yard and thinking about it over the 4 seasons of the year, are there places where there are gaps in your yard that you might want to add some interest? This is often something that I have noticed in my yard, that during certain times of the year, and late summer is a big time when there are just things are looking dead and they're just gaps and there's nothing going on, where in my mind's eye, when I was planning it in the springtime, there was going to be something going on there for the summer, but not so much. There's a big gap. So I'm thinking about, how am I going to fill those gaps during the next season? And as you're thinking about selecting and buying plants, one of the things I want to caution is that you do not shop for the 2-week wonders, what we call the 2-week wonders. In the springtime, we're so excited about the being able to get out into the yard and the fresh air, and we're seeing things coming up and we get all excited. So we run to the nursery and we buy some plants, only to find that they were in their height of blooming when you bought them, and after 2 to 4 weeks, they're gone. They either go into hibernation and to return the next year, or they have just bloomed out and died. So think about, and this is where you are getting to know your plant and making those smart plant selections, getting to know those plants, studying, really learning about the bloom habits. Can they tolerate the heat of the summer? Will they take the winter frost, winter freezes? What will fit in your garden? And also think about those multi-season stars, such as dogwoods, ilex, the hollies, rhododendrons, that have interest in the garden, as we saw in Lynn's garden, the rhododendrons especially, all year round. Think about those. All right, now let's look at some pictures and think about specific choices that you might want to make. And as we start looking at particular plants, I want to remind all that we all have those plants that are our favorites, that no matter what else is going on in the yard, there will be this. And for me, one of those is there will always be lantana in my yard. I love lantana. The hummingbirds are attracted to them. The bees and the butterflies love them. So all I have to do is find a place to have them, because I will always have lantana in my garden. And you may also have those favorite flowers, shrubs, vines, that no matter what else, you want to have those. So think about that. Plan for them, plan around them, find the companion plants that go with them well. And in the springtime, you can think about bulbs, perennials, those flowering trees. Wildflowers are a great addition to anyone's gardens. Shrubs, grasses. Don't forget the grasses that provide a lot of texture all year round, but start coming up in the springtime. All right, now I'm showing you this picture because this is the absolute ideal spring garden for me. I will never have it, but this is, if I had a choice, this is the spring garden that I would have in my yard. And you will see that it's like a river of the purple hyacinths flowing through a forest woodland scape there with the evergreens and all around them. And you have daffodils and tulips coming up on the side. And to me, that is the height of beauty in the springtime. It's what I aspire to have, but based on my yard and my conditions, I will never be able to have that. But isn't that a gorgeous scene? All right, now let's say you have a lot of evergreens, or you want to maybe a little lower maintenance yard, but you still want to have interest throughout the year. Here's a great way of putting in spring flowering trees and shrubs, smaller bushes, to have during the early spring that give you that pop of color coming up through the landscape. Here's another option, and this is in my garden, and I have a lot of ferns. And in the early spring, the ferns are just beginning to wake up and they're not doing much yet. So I have a lot of early spring and mid-spring bloomers that come up through, that come up in the garden, and then the ferns can come up through them and cover them as they die back. In the foreground there, you'll see the bleeding heart with beautiful pink blossoms. It's a chartreuse bleeding heart. Over to the left, you've got bloodroot. You've got the Lenten roses on each side there showing. And I love Lenten roses, by the way, because oftentimes in my yard, especially, it's the first thing that I see in coming up either late January, early February. It's the first time to see something actually blooming in my yard, and they are always a favorite. Plus, they provide a nice evergreen background throughout the year. There also, you'll see Solomon's Seal in the background, and I have some trillium that have already bloomed out, but that pop up throughout the garden in the early spring. In the summertime, there's an extended, around here, it's an extended growing season. And what I've found for mine is that oftentimes in the early spring, in early summer, I have all of these beautiful flowers that are blooming and they look so fresh, and we've had the spring rains to give them lots of water, and they're beautiful and they're attracting all kinds of pollinators, and that landscape just is just real eye-catching. But what happens is about midsummer, things begin to look very tired and worn out. And this is where I work to find, and I hope maybe as you assess your yard, you may find that you already have a great array of plants that provide a staying power throughout the summer. I don't, and I'm having to work on that. So I'm looking for plants that if they don't bloom all summer, I want to look at what else do they provide. Maybe the blossoms, as they die back, the seed heads become seed heads that the birds enjoy eating, and I'm finding that in my yard. So, but I might want to bring in some other flowers that once the early bloomers are beginning to look tired and faded, that they come into their own and can provide more interest to continue from the late summer on into the fall. Always can think about your water sources too. Do you have water sources, ways to keep those flowers looking good during the hot time of the summer? Or are you looking, or are you finding plants that are drought resistant if that's what your yard needs? Here are a couple of examples of summer gardens. On the left, you will see the cut leaf coneflower, which that particular one is over 6 feet tall and has bloomed starting about midsummer, has bloomed all summer long. And the seed heads, the flowers are dying back and becoming great seed heads for birds to go. You'll also see some butterfly bush. There's the lantana in the background there. There's a small dwarf crepe myrtle there. There's some liastra. We've got monardo. This is a wonderful butterfly garden that has kept birds, flowers, birds, bees, and butterflies coming all summer long. On the right, you'll see the hyacinth bean that is interwoven with the cypress vine, which is the red there. And this is a great attractor, once again, enhances the native habitat and an attractor for birds and bees, pollinators. In the foreground, you'll see the salvia, the pink salvia there that has bloomed all summer long. And it's down and mingled in, there are various herbs. I had to throw this picture in because it's the hyacinth bean vine there that I love that. It comes up from seeds that I harvest off the plant each fall, and because it is an annual, but it provides for hummingbirds, which are one of my very favorite birds, and I'm always looking for things that will attract the hummingbirds. This not only provides the perch for the hummingbirds, but the blossoms also are a source of nectar for them. And this particular hummingbird is actually sitting there perched, and he's eating a small insect, which is very difficult to see, but he has his mouth open and is just about to take in a small insect. So this is, to me, is a wonderful addition for gardens. This is another display of just a riot of blooms, and you've got annual impatiens in there, you've got astilbe in the background, you've got grasses, hosta, you've got a wide variety, and way in the background, you've got black-eyed Susies back there, the Rebecca. So you have a wide variety of plants there that provide that robust burst of color. Now the fall comes and we think, well, there's not much. It's like the season's over. Oh no, there are still a lot of flowers that come into their own during the fall, such as sedum, asters, mums, salvias that enjoy the heat of the summer and go right up to frost. This is the time to look for the colors of trees and shrubs, how they enhance an environment. Viburnum is a great subject. There are many varieties of viburnum, and so you can have them blooming at various times, and their blossoms turn into wonderful berries. So does the dogwood. Others that have hollies that have berries for the fall going on into winter. This is also a time where grasses provide a lot of texture in the landscaping of your yard, or can provide, and bark on the trees. Look at your trees. Is there a lot of interest there? Especially after the leaves are gone, you can begin to see what's left, and oftentimes you'll see a lot of wonderful texture in the bark on your trees. The fall is also a time to begin to think about the spring and plant bulbs, do some cleanup, and also planting of bulbs and maybe perennials for the spring of the next year. Here's a good example of one on the left is a more formal arrangement. Looks like almost they've decorated the front of their house using the mums with kale. They have an evergreen shrub of some sort there. They have dry twigs coming out of it. So it's a wonderful fall display that has color to it. It's not still fresh, and it's fresh and vibrant. On the right side, you will see someone's natural garden there. They have the trees that are turning, the leaves on the trees are turning. They've got evergreens, they've got the grasses that have bloomed out in the back, the shrubs where the leaves are changing color on the shrubs, and in the very back, they've still got evergreen trees back there as a backdrop. All right, now we get to two of my favorite pictures. On the right, you will see a beautiful tree in full fall color, and it's ablaze, and I love it. And in the very background behind the tree, you'll see the evergreen, which makes the tree pop even more against the evergreen backdrop. Now, once all these leaves are gone, you're going to see the wonderful structure of the tree that will be there all winter long. And if you look at this particular tree, it has a beautiful, very flowing artistic structure to the tree, the bare tree itself. Now, after you've worked hard all spring, summer, and maybe even into the fall, it's time to just sit back and enjoy the fruit of your labor. And this is the time where you also want to look around your garden. What did well for you? What do you want to change? What didn't do so well? What would you like to add in the spring? Is it time now to put in some bulbs, or to add some perennials, especially if they're going on sale, to your yard, so that your springtime is there for you, waiting for you to enjoy. But do take a few moments and enjoy the fruit of your labor. Wintertime. All right, what is there in the wintertime? Well, there's a lot. There are evergreens and shrubs that are green all year. I have ferns that are perennials that also remain green all winter long. It's also, we start thinking about cleaning up the yard, and I want to caution that you don't clean your yard up too much, that you leave stuff there for birds and insects, butterflies and bees to have nesting places, to have places where they can hibernate over the winter and come back to be great pollinators and provide for your natural habitat. It's also a time when you might want to think about hardscaping. You know, what do you need to add? Do you want to add something to your yard in the way of giant pots or a water feature or a bench, some rocks, a log? There are all kinds of hardscape ideas that are available to enhance a yard. And the wintertime is the time you might want to think about that. Think about looking at your yard, the shape of your trees and shrubs. Do you have a nice flow, as Chris had talked about earlier, where you have layers coming through? And also, once again, water sources. You want to provide something in nature for the natural habitat during the long winter. Here's a picture from Gibbs Garden, where they have a wonderful display of evergreens, including evergreen hollies and various kinds of trees. They have a water feature there. They have the grass in the foreground. They have a hardscape there in a large bridge. Most of us can't add a big bridge in our yard, but they do have a pond there with the rock formation in the background there. There are all kinds of ways to make your winter garden interesting. And one of the last things I want to talk about is embrace brown. We all look out the window in the wintertime and we think how dull everything is. Well, I challenge you to look around and say, whoa, look at all the texture there. Look at all the various shades of brown there are, and celebrate that. You know, maybe you're leaving your flowers and you're not cutting all the dead blossoms off of your flowers, and you're leaving the seed heads so that the birds have something, and that provides a lot of interest in the yard. So don't think of brown as dull and boring. Think about it and embrace the color brown during the winter. All right, here are two different scenes in the wintertime. On the left, you will see a more informal, but it still has a lot of texture, like in the tree. You've got grasses, you've got some hardscape there in a giant pot that has been made into a water feature. You've got in the far background, you've got evergreens back there. So there's a lot. This is where I'm talking about embrace your brown. Look at that and see the beauty in what you have there. On the right, you'll see some color mixed in with the brown. You've got the red twig dogwood. You've got some variations of your evergreens. You've got sedum in the foreground there that adds texture and head color up until frost, and of course the texture of the grasses there. So we're winding down now. We've gone through the 4 seasons and talked about what you can do to enhance the look of your garden and to make it into a wonderland that you enjoy. And I do want to just say, also think about nature and how your landscaping, your natural habitat that you have in your yard can be there to support environmental continuity within your yard.
So thank you all very much as Marian concludes going through the 4 seasons. We hope you have learned something from this presentation. We hope this information opens up your imagination to new ideas and to new possibilities. And I think we've tried to share with you that through study, planning, and making appropriate plant choices, you can create your own landscape to resonate with beauty and support ecology every day of the year. We have attached a handout, which we hope provides you some additional resources to do that.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation and that you learned something that will help you in your gardening endeavors, whether that means more blooms on your flowers and ornamental shrubs, attracting more pollinators to your garden, or improving your vegetable production. As we were not able to field your questions today, we want to close by offering you some ways to reach us. As you can see on this slide, we have a presence on Facebook. You may post questions to either of these Facebook pages. Feel free to upload a photo, especially if it helps to describe the problem you have. If you are not a Facebook user, you may call the Extension office at 865-215-2340 and leave a detailed message with your question. Your question will be forwarded to a Master Gardener to research and respond to you. You may also send an email to Ryland Thompson, the Knox County Extension agent who advises the local Master Gardener program. If a photo would help to describe the problem, feel free to attach one or two. Try to keep the total attachments to less than 5 megabytes. You may get a response directly from Ryland, or he may route your question to a Master Gardener to research and respond to you. We are eager to return to public presentations. In the meantime, you can watch any of our recorded presentations by going to our website, finding a Speakers Bureau event on the calendar, and clicking on the link that is included within the event details. Now, let's go get some dirt under our fingernails.